Welcome into this edition of the Golf Channel podcast with Rex and Lav. Not going to lie, that was a beefy week. We almost did an emergency podcast last Friday. Probably should have, didn't. And so we are jam-packing it all into this one. We're talking, of course, Rory McIlroy and Patrick Reed, the duel in the Dubai desert. We're talking the trajectory of Max Homa, became the king of Cali with another win, the Farmers Insurance Open. We'll break down the LIV preseason event, essentially. The Saudi International, which is drawing some familiar names as well as some intriguing ones. Rex, this is the rare time we're both home this week. So what stood out to you over the past week as you were just chomping at the bit
so much
action this week?
And normally I don't go down this road because that seemed like whatever, and we'll get into it more, whatever happened between Rory McIlroy and Patrick Reed on the range in Dubai seemed like such high school sophomore nonsense, right? When you kind of look at it from the outside and sort of trying to figure out the dynamics between these two individuals. And I didn't want to go down that road where now all of a sudden we're TMZ. Like, I wanted to try to avoid that. However, now that in retrospect we had everything that happened, and between Patrick Reed making a run at Rory, who ended up winning and called it emotional and called it one of the greatest victories of his career because he was able to shut out all the noise, to
toughest. Didn't say greatest, he said
toughest. To Patrick Reed having another rule snafu.
Are probably greater.
I would think so. To Patrick Reed having another rules snafu, which, by the way, if you haven't gone onto social media and saw Brandel Chambly break this down like this is a brutal film, you're just not living life. I don't know what you're doing.
Detail.
Oh, my. I mean, it was frame by frame by frame, and there was someone on that grassy knoll, and I'm not quite sure if it was Patrick Reed or Rory McIlroy or who it was. There was so much that went into this, and among all of that, on Saturday, kind of quietly, you had, I think, one of the coolest finish of this young PGA Tour season. I was rooting, full disclosure here, Sam Ryder is from the 32779. That would be Longwood, Florida. That would be my neighborhood. He's my son's favorite player. I like Sam a lot. I was rooting for him. I know we're not supposed to root. I was rooting for the story, not the player, and a little heartbroken, but the way it played out, I thought was very, very cool. It's sort of a background context of what was a crazy week in professional golf.
Yeah, we were going to have Cole Hoggard call into the podcast.
He just went to play golf. I tried to talk him into hanging around. He wasn't doing it. He wasn't having it.
Unfortunately, that Sam Ryder story ended about 9 holes a little too late for him. Let's talk, Rex. Let's start first with the tee toss. I know this is, at this point, old news. Video emerged 2 days after the incident. There was nothing. There was nothing here. It was a lighthearted moment. Clearly, Rory McIlroy showing his disgust. I think both players probably erred in this situation by airing their grievances publicly and trading barbs in the press. Rory clearly got some of the facts mixed up. I can see how it was. It wasn't Patrick Reed who was suing Rory. It was one of Reed's lawyers, Larry Klayman, in a separate antitrust lawsuit case. Still, the optics of that were obviously not great, getting served a subpoena on Christmas Eve. And then Patrick Reed just couldn't help himself, calling Rory an immature little child and saying if he's going to act like one, he deserves to be treated like one. Who was most wrong in this scenario? Because they were, I think both probably were a little bit out of bounds, but who was most wrong in the situation?
Oh, Patrick Reed. I mean, but look, he's not alone here, and I'm probably going to be in the minority because I am going to go out on a limb and not defend Patrick Reed, but I certainly have seen where he and his like come from, and I don't mean that in a negative tone. Look, they're tone deaf. If you don't understand why what you did walking away has impacted the PGA Tour, and especially Rory McIlroy, of all people, he has been the most passionate, the most outspoken, the most ardent opponent of LIV Golf. If you don't understand that maybe that's not a good exchange, walking up to him on the range, then you're kind of tone deaf. You're living your life in sort of a bubble, and you need to understand it a little bit better. Now, the tee toss was silly. I mean, I didn't even think that Patrick Reed had that good of a sense of humor. So I was actually kind of impressed that he was even able to pull that off in the heat of
the LIV branded tee.
The LIV branded tee. But here's the deal, and this is why, having been at Doral at the tour finale for LIV Golf last year, the vast majority, not all of them, certainly Harold Varner is the exception, and there's a few others, but the vast majority of players who went to LIV Golf don't understand the animosity. They don't understand why there's this vitriol from the PGA Tour perspective looking back. And it has a lot to do with the lawsuits. You pointed out, Rory got subpoenaed on Christmas Eve. No one's going to like that. To your point, he kind of got his lawsuits mixed. And I can tell you, as someone who's digging through court files,
there's so many lawsuits.
There's so many lawsuits. Everybody's getting subpoena.
How could you keep them all straight?
I mean, this is a visual medium, but Trust me when I tell you, everybody's getting subpoenaed. It's happening. No one is not getting subpoenaed. There was just a discovery dispute this week in the case in San Jose, where Live Golf wanted to subpoena every member at Augusta, and they had to come up with some sort of compromise. And now it's going to be about 24 members of Augusta. If you haven't gotten subpoenaed, then you haven't been paying attention. There is probably one in the mail for you.
I remember last week on this podcast, I mentioned that this reported incident with Rory McIlroy and Patrick Reed on the range. You didn't even want to mention Patrick Reed's name.
I didn't even want to go
on
there.
This podcast.
Still don't want to go there. And that's why I'm and again, I don't want to get into a habit of defending Patrick Reed because we'll get into the other stuff that kind of went on. For him to call someone else's behavior childish, again, that's living your life in an echo chamber. I mean, have some sort of self-awareness, because in this particular case, you shouldn't have done it. I will say, however, and you and I can debate this, if it's Dustin Johnson walking up to Rory on that range in Dubai, that's an entirely different scenario. I don't think I'm out of bounds saying this. By all accounts, that group of players still kind of mix in the same circles in South Florida. I'm not saying they're sharing a table at the Woods, but there is not that animosity between DJ and Rory is probably the best example. They're still sponsored by the same sponsor. They still do commercials together. So this is a Patrick Reed and Rory McIlroy thing. I don't think it's a very good indication of a PGA Tour Live Golf thing.
Very pricey appetizers at the Woods, if you have not been.
That
certainly is besides the point. Patrick Reed wants to be liked. That's been one of the predominant characteristics of his entire career. He desperately wants to be liked and isn't quite sure how to go around it. And these two, they've sparred at the Ryder Cup, obviously, with that memorable singles match. In 2016, they went head-to-head at the Masters in 2018 with Patrick Reed getting the upper hand there. Rory McIlroy has actually gone out of his way to defend Patrick Reed and some of these rules infractions over the past couple of years. There was reason to think that maybe they're not the best of friends, but there's certainly a mutual respect between those two players. I think, you're right. This was Patrick Reed wanting to be liked, and it was Patrick Reed being oblivious of the situation and not understanding kind of the underlying subplots of these lawsuits and what it means. So that was the tee toss, and Rory McIlroy and Patrick Reed kind of went into the tournament feeling like they had something to prove, and both of them played pretty well. Rory certainly didn't have his best stuff, and we'll get into that in a little bit. But Patrick Reed hadn't really showed anything for much of 2022, didn't win a live event, didn't factor in any of the major championships, and this was kind of the spark that he needed to find something in his game. And then Rex came yet another rules incident. Well, there's a very long line of rules incident. If you guys didn't see it, if you somehow did not see this, Patrick Reed tee shot on the drivable 17th in the third round got lodged in one of the palm trees. Which palm tree is a matter of some debate. However, a rules official corroborated Patrick Reed saying that he could see the markings of his own golf ball in the tree, was allowed to drop it there with an unplayable, ended up making bogey as opposed to going back to the tee and hitting three, potentially making double and dropping even further back. Did you have any sense, Rex, any opinion on whether Patrick Reed was playing by the rules or whether he was trying to get away with something here?
Not after Brandel Chambly broke that down. I mean, at first I sort of dismissed it because this happens. I mean, it seems like it happens to Patrick Reed a lot, but this happens on the PGA Tour on a daily basis. I mean, there are situations like this where players are having to try to figure out. According to Patrick Reed, that was his ball, quote, 100%. He was that certain.
100% sure.
So if you're the rules official, you don't have another option in that scenario. There's no way for you to overrule that, even in the heat of the moment. This goes back to Torrey Pines just a few years ago when it was, again, Patrick Reed, and his ball bounced, and then somehow it was embedded. Now, it turned out that Roy had the exact same situation on the 18th hole that exact same day at Torrey Pines. It's to label a player a cheat in golf, and I'm not doing that to Patrick Reed. Please let that go on the record. Let me be crystal clear about this. I am not labeling Patrick Reed a cheat. However, that is a label that doesn't wash off easily, and he continues to find himself on the wrong side of this.
Yeah, he's probably lost the benefit of the doubt, and any sort of rules incident is going to be under heightened scrutiny because it is Patrick Reed. If this was Max Homa who was involved in this incident, it's probably a non-issue because he has a reputation for playing within the boundaries of the game. Patrick Reed, fairly or not, has lost that benefit of the doubt. The question I still have, and it was not answered by a DP World Tour official, they came out with a clarification afterward, was did Patrick Reed tell the rules official, hey, we're looking for a Titleist 3 with the black line on it, with the arrow and the red dot, and then the rules official goes ahead and puts the binoculars on and tries to find the ball? Or was it, here's some binoculars, see if you can find your ball, finds the ball, yep,
Yep, 100%. That's mine.
I see one with a black arrow and a red dot. That has not been resolved. That has not been answered. That's the main question that I have. And certainly, video footage can lie. I saw the breakdown of Brandel Chambly going into forensic detail with this. I still think there's a little bit of ambiguity which tree the ball actually went into. It's not out of the realm of possibility that the ball at the camera angle was misleading in this particular scenario. I would have liked to hear whether the rules official, hey, what are we looking for here? Looking for the arrow, the red dot. Go ahead and look in the tree. So that's a question I have right now, which is why I'm kind of wishy-washy on whether he was fair or not.
Here's the deal. I don't care if it was his ball. I really don't. Because it seems to me in this was an NBA game, right? Everyone would be screaming ball don't lie because that's what happens, right? So if you feel like that a player got a call that they probably shouldn't have got, it usually evens itself out. I think in this case, you could even make the argument that it evened itself out. Rory ended up winning. Patrick Reed did not end up winning.
However, can you imagine, Rex, the howling that would have occurred had those two players gotten into a playoff or Patrick Reed had won by a single shot? And this was still very much in question of what transpired in that palm tree.
That goes to my very next point. I'm here for all of it. This makes me look forward to the major championships, certainly the Masters, where there will be live players in the field. We already know that. We're not 100% sure what's going to happen at the PGA Championship. But going forward, when these two groups get together, if this is going to be the status quo, if the animosity is now going to replace whatever it was in golf that made sort of this genteel sport, suddenly become this, I'm not even going to shake your hand. Okay, fine. I'm going to throw a tee at you. That's where we're going to end up. Give me all of it. Like, I cannot wait to get to the Masters on Monday and watch them on the range. All of them. Phil, Rory, JT, Jordan, DJ. Like, if this is what's going to become of golf, if we're going to become the WWE, here for all of it.
So that is my next question. And so, spoiler alert, Roy went on to win, birdied the last two holes. We'll get into Rory
Didn't we already
McIlroy.
give that away?
And his season open victory. However, Rex, there is a hearing in the UK next week to determine the fate of the live players and whether those live rebels can continue to play on the DP World Tour or whether the European Tour can ban them and thus make them ineligible for the Ryder Cup. In your opinion, should Keith Pelley secretly be hoping that they lose this case? Because the presence of live golfers in these tournaments makes these events infinitely more interesting. I'm not privy to the viewership numbers. I have no idea whether this rated well. It was in Dubai with a serious time change.
But it was Monday.
Time zone.
I would love to know the numbers on that Monday finish. Yeah.
But look, it's also ending at 6 a.m. On the East Coast. It makes these events infinitely more interesting than having the presence of these live golfers. If you take those names off the leaderboard, if you take Patrick Reed, if you take Ian Poulter, Henrik Stenson, all those guys, Richard Bland, all those guys factor prominently in this golf tournament. If you remove them from this leaderboard, it's another ho-hum event on the DP World Tour, and Rory McIlroy wins easily by 3 shots, and no one particularly cares. Live guys are making the DP World Tour more interesting. Do you think he's kind of hoping selfishly for his tournament's sake, for the interest in his tournaments?
I don't think
that they're allowed to continue to play.
I don't think Keith is, because look, he's in this. I mean, again, named in multiple lawsuits. He has chosen the PGA Tour as his side. They're the establishment. They're the ones that Live Golf is coming after. So I don't think it's Live, but I can guarantee you the BMWs and the Volvos and the other sponsors of these DP World Tour events, certainly DP World, love this idea, because all it is getting more and more eyeballs that you would probably never have otherwise. And again, I know I've said this before. I'm not going to try to predict what any court is going to do. By all accounts, talking with a couple of experts in the UK, unlike the court case in San Jose, this is a hearing that could very, very easily go the live players' way. It's different laws, it's different outlooks, it's different sensitivities. This is about being able to work freely, and that this is it. They look at these things much different than probably we do here in the United States. So this could very easily go live golf's way. By all accounts, internally, if it does, the DP World Tour is ready to blow up what is essentially their constitution, change their constitution, and make it easier for them to suspend these players. That remains to be seen. However, you're right. I don't think Keith or anyone who's at Whitewater at their headquarters is thinking to themselves, "Oh, okay, yeah, this is what I want to happen." But I guarantee the sponsors love the idea.
And we'll certainly talk through the ramifications of that hearing. It's supposed to begin next week. And look, it's not just the fact that live players would remain eligible or not for the Ryder Cup. It remains to be seen whether Luke Donald would even pick one of these players, assuming they do not qualify. But it's also an avenue then for the live players to continue to receive world ranking points. And so if the majors do not change their qualification criteria for the top 50, top 60, whatever their particular major is, this is a way that the Patrick Reeds, the Ian Poulters, the Lee Westwoods of the world can continue to stay afloat. And look, those guys, if they want to, would be then having a tournament schedule that consists of 25, 30 events to go along with the 14 live tournaments and the 4 majors, as well as some on the European tour. But what do you think this win, Rex, means for Rory? This is the first time we'd seen him in 2 months. It bears repeating for as much attention as Jon Rahm's hot start to the 2023 calendar year on the PGA Tour has gone. I mean, Rory has not finished outside the top 4 since the Tour Championship at Eastlake in late August. This was a guy who was on an absolute heater. He just so happened to shut it down for the final 2 months of 2022. This was certainly not his best stuff, but I think it's also quite revealing that he was able to win what was a pretty stacked field without his best stuff.
And to hear him talk before the tournament, just about, I mean, we could all kind of surmise and guess how exhausting last season was for him, both on and off the golf course. I mean, to do what you do on the golf course and to do what he did off the golf course, to be that spokesperson, to be the lightning rod, to want all of the heat, I think it's almost impossible, at least for me, to sort of wrap my mind around how consuming is that. I have a hard time waking up in the morning and puddling around my house, let alone dealing with these issues and then trying to play golf at the highest level. And he kind of gave voice to that last week. And so for him, and again, 2 months off, that's going to give anybody sort of a fresh outlook on life. But for him to come back after that and to do this, remember last week when we sat and we talked about the world ranking and how the math was messed up and Jon Rahm was mad? Simpler times.
I mean, they're clearly the best 2 players in the world. Like, they have almost identical scoring averages over their past 7 starts. Jon Rahm has 1 more win, 4, as opposed to Rory's 3. But like, they have the same number of top 5 finishes. The scoring average is almost identical. These 2 players have clearly separated themselves at the top of the world order.
Which is going to make, I mean, so once we get into whatever the quote unquote designated season is, elevated season, it's going to make that much more fascinating because now you're going to get these 2 together.
Hashtag elevated season.
Elevated
season. Which begins next week. The Phoenix
That's right,
Open.
in Phoenix, which is already a really good event, and now you're turning it into something even bigger. So it remains to be seen how these changes are going to impact kind of the rest of the tour. But certainly with a scenario where you have these 2 players, and then you factor in, it's not as though Scotty Scheffler is playing bad. It's not as though Colin Morikawa is playing bad or any of the rest of them are playing poorly. These 2 have separated themselves, but it creates a scenario that is really going to be entertaining over the next few weeks.
You mentioned the burden that Rory assumed in 2022, much of his own making. And look, I understand he probably had more conference calls and more player-to-player interactions that took away potentially from some of his preparation time. But to me, I also think it was motivating. I think it was crystallizing. I think there was a sense that he wanted to back up his play with all of his words. And look, he said he expended a lot of energy when he used to buy Judge Classic. Certainly more energy than he was anticipating in what was the first time in his career. Even though he's always started hot out of the gates, it's the first time that he's won in his career. But I still think there's going to be that sense that he's not just protecting his world ranking, but he's protecting his tour. He's protecting his fellow peers. He's protecting kind of the brand and the legacy that he is trying to make in the world of golf. And so this was one step, and I don't see Rory McIlroy taking a step back at all in 2023, as the burden is not going to get any lighter. I do want to give Rex a shout out to Patrick Reed, because this guy absolutely thrives amid controversy. How he's able to compartmentalize the circus that he creates around him and excel in between the ropes is unbelievable. Think about the 2018 Masters, and there was a subplot there with his parents not being able to watch on the grounds at Augusta National. That was in 2018. The 2019 Hero performed well despite the bunker issue there. A week later at the President's Cup, his caddy got kicked out, remember? And then in singles,
I
Patrick
was
Reed
told by
romped.
team members in the U.S. team room, and this is a quote unquote, he was a cancer on that team
Right.
room. Yeah.
Right. So he was a cancer in the team room. And then what does he do? He routs his opponent in Sunday singles and was at least a contributing factor for the American comeback on the final day at Royal Melbourne. Who could forget the Farmers Insurance Open, where he was poking around in the rough with what was an embedded lie? He went on to win, Rex, by 5 shots. Everyone was up in arms that there may have been something nefarious going on in that Tangley rough at Torrey Pines, and yet all he does is go on to win by 5 shots. Then you have T-Gate, then you have Treegate, and Patrick Reed shoots 65 on the final round and nearly steals the Dubai title. Like, the guy is absolutely incredible. It almost makes you wonder, like, is he doing it on purpose so that it kind of brings out his best golf? Guys get chips on their shoulders in various ways. Brooks Koepka famously did so in golf over the past half decade or so. Like, Patrick Reed absolutely loves the drama, and it seems to bring out his best golf.
I think and this goes to other athletes in other sports, right? My mind immediately goes to Michael Jordan. In retrospect, when you listen to that Hall of Fame speech that he gave, you realize that, MJ was motivated by very, very negative things. Like, he took everything as a slight, even things
Very
that
unsavory Hall of Fame speech, like the worst speech ever. Could be.
It seemed like he came out swinging for no. A lot of people caught strays in that speech that probably didn't deserve to catch strays, simply because he took some shots at people that they weren't trying to be negative. They were just telling a story. And I guess as a journalist, I'm going to be a little defensive here, but you see the exact same thing in Patrick Reed, where he thrives on this negative sort of outcome idea. I've been around him when things are going fine, when he's playing well, and there aren't these distractions, and it doesn't seem to focus him. Like, he seems to get focused. I mean, last week was going to be different, at the very least, for all of the LIV players. Anytime they show up at one of these DP World Tour events, certainly when they show up at the major championships, they know the spotlight's going to be on them. They're going to continue to get the questions. The narrative's not going to go away. So it's going to be a little uncomfortable, and most of them don't like it. I've spoken with Richard Bland. It's probably a perfect example. Graham McDowell is probably even a better example, where he hates it.
Non-confrontational fellas. Absolutely.
Exactly. Motivated by very, very positive things. If my game's going in the right way, if my life at home is going in the right way, everything else moves in the right way. I would say Max Homa, your winner at Torrey Pines, is the exact same thing. I mean, here's a guy that loves to have the smile on his face, loves to be motivated by positive things. Patrick Reed's not like that, and you can see that. I mean, I don't think it's a knock to compare him to MJ, and you can probably make the same argument. Kevin Durant seems to me kind of the same kind of guy. You don't have ghost Twitter accounts if you're not motivated by negative things, because you want to get in there and you want to fight with the unseen masses. I think Patrick is the exact same person.
Patrick Reed and Michael Jordan, you just compared them. That is the first time in podcast history. I would probably use like a Draymond Green
Mark that, Jordan. Mark
comparison as opposed to MJ, but your point remains. You did bring up Max Homa, the winner at the Farmers Insurance Open with a Saturday finish. You and I have both stumped for 4 consecutive Saturday finishes. Still hearing back from Tour HQ whether that will be considered for 2024. But look, Max Homa is all the way up now, Rex, to 6 PGA Tour wins. I wrote about this a little bit on Monday Scramble on golfchannel.com. What's striking to me is the duality of his golf personas. There is this self-aware funny man who, away from the golf course, you and I have both spent a lot of time with him in interview settings. Like, you can count on one hand the number of players who are potentially better interviews than Max Homa. He is top 3, if not the best in all of golf. And yet inside the ropes, especially when you get him in contention, like, the dude is an absolute stone cold assassin. I understand that he does not put himself in position to win as much as a Rahm or a Rory or a Scotty or a Colin Morikawa. But you think about this stat, Rex. Max Homa has 9 top 3 finishes on the PGA Tour. 6 have gone for wins. In other words, when this dude sniffs contention, if he even has an inkling that he might win the golf tournament, he's going to go and seize it. That is an incredible attribute to have as an athlete. And I just find it jarring. I find it striking that he's able to have these 2 personas, which you wouldn't think that this funny man on social media, or this guy who's deeply introspective and maybe even a little bit insecure about his golfing talent, who, when he gets a chance to win, he absolutely goes for the jugular.
You're calling him a closer, but let's say it.
He absolutely
say the
is
thing.
a closer. You don't think of Max Homa as one of the game's preeminent closers. You think of JT, you think of Rahm,
Tiger,
obviously, back in his heyday. But like, Max Homa's closing rate is exceptional.
That's pretty
If he's
impressive. I didn't know
if
that.
he's
I
if he's
didn't know
if
that
he's
stat.
there, like if he's there, he's going to slam the door.
No, that's very good. And I would say, and we've made sort of this connection before. I think it was Scotty Scheffler who 2 years ago, coming out of the Ryder Cup, and he used sort of that performance and that experience to sort of propel him to what he did early last year in the spring, went on that dominant run. I can imagine that Max is going to do a similar thing, because I think being on that team last year at Quail Hollow, and it was a best case scenario for a guy like Max Homa, because he didn't have to be the star. The American team was stacked. It's not as though he showed up and realized that, oh, I might be a rookie, but I'm going to have to win 3 points for us to have any kind of chance. And yet he came out and performed. I mean, he turned into one of the American studs last year at Quail Hollow.
He had that clinching putt. I think it was on Friday
Yeah.
or Saturday, when the clutch putt on top of one of the international players. Like that was like a seminal moment for the American win.
And I don't think it carries with it the same cachet that maybe having that same sort of performance in the Ryder Cup would have, simply because of it's a much more relaxed atmosphere. We talk about this all the time, but I don't think you can ignore the idea that if you put a player in a situation and the pressure is very real, whether if it's manufactured or if it's not, he's going to make it very, very real internally. I mean, he spoke openly at Quail Hollow about how nervous he was and how he really wanted to perform well. To be able to do that under the gun on command, I don't think we can say how important that is for a player. I wouldn't be surprised at all if he goes on a little run. I'm not going to say he's going to go on a Scotty Scheffler run, because he hasn't proven to be that consistent week in and week out. But I'm not going to be surprised if he adds 7, 8. I mean, if he adds PGA Tour wins number 7 and 8 very, very soon.
But I mean, he's getting to the point.
Who's a good boy?
He's getting to the point now where he has won, a tenth of his PGA Tour starts over the past year and a half. I mean, he's got 4 wins in the past year and a half. Like, the guy has been absolutely tearing it up. I think the obviously the glaring omission in his tour resume and his resume at large is his major championship performance. This is a player who is yet to have a top 10 finish in a major championship. Finished T13 last year at the PGA Championship. Before that, I mean, it was absolutely ugly. Had not finished better than 40th in a major championship to that point, with a ton of missed cuts. Now, there's a couple of reasons for that. Max Homa, now the player that we see January 31st, 2023, is a markedly improved player through the bag than he was even a couple years ago. Last year he was 13th on the PGA Tour in strokes gained total. He does absolutely everything well, and that was not the case a couple of years ago. But it's gotten to the point now that if Max Homa doesn't get himself in contention for a major championship, I'm not saying he has to win one. I'm not saying he has to finish in the top 3. I'm not saying he has to finish in the top 5. But he does not have a top 10 at the very least in a major championship in 2023, I would find that to be extremely disappointing for a player of his caliber. It needs to get to the point now where, he improved on his championship record last year. This year he makes it the next step and gets kind of on the fringes of contention, right? And then you could see in 2024 that this player could win one. Although LACC has certainly been circled for a player of Max Homa's record. 61 there about a decade ago, holds the course record, and also won the Pac-12 championship back when he played for Cal.
Okay, before you went on your gas baggery, I was about to make fun of you for holding your finger up to your dog as if your dog can understand exactly what the index finger looks like. But
no,
apparently,
there was a man. No, there was a man who entered, and he quickly.
A strange man entered your house during the podcast.
Yeah, one of our workers for the myriad projects that we have going on in the house.
I thought you were in trouble. Blink 3 times if you're in trouble.
Very respectfully exited the house during this podcast recording. Rex, was there anything else that stood out to you at the Farmers? I did want to touch on the in-round walk and talk. Hopefully, Rex, Max Homa going on to win a day after he kind of broke some new ground, right? With the in-round walk and talk. It's been kind of a staple of DP World Tour coverage over the past couple of years, but this is the first time on the PGA Tour, at least, that a player popped in an Airbud, just as you and I have done here, and let viewers inside the ropes in gaining some valuable insight for an entire hole. It wasn't just kind of a couple questions and move on. Do you think that Max Homa can set a trend here? Do you think the John Rahms, the Justin Thomases, the Jordan Spieths will allow either CBS or NBC kind of this inside look at what goes on?
What about Golf Channel? Golf Channel can do the same thing.
I want to see on Saturday. I want to see on Saturday. I don't want to see a player who's T40.
I'll take it on Thursday. I'm going to break the fourth wall here, and Max Homa is the outlier here. The reason
he's the perfect guinea pig for the experiment. There's no doubt.
He is, but trust me when I tell you, NBC, CBS, Golf Channel, no, we're not doing this because we don't want to do it. This has been a conversation since I've been at the Golf Channel, even before, with players internally at player meetings, at PAC meetings, at policy board meetings. They don't want to do it. They certainly don't want to do it on a Saturday when the tension is high. And the stakes are very, very real. Trust
That's
me,
what we want to watch. We don't
John Rahm is never going to agree to that.
We don't want to see
it is hard enough to get him to talk. Well, it's hard enough to get him to talk after a round. You're not going to get him to talk during a round. And look, I'm not being mean to John Rahm. I mean, he takes himself very, very seriously, as he should, because he's very, very successful. But no, he's not going to pop in an earbud midway through the round on the 15th hole and suddenly start yakking it up.
But hasn't Live
Max
Golf
Homa
made
will.
clear? Hasn't Live Golf over the past year, Rex, made clear that the PGA Tour is an entertainment product first and foremost, and you need to have more buy-in from PGA Tour players when it comes to making for a better fan experience, even if they're just watching at home.
It should be performative. I agree with you. It should be. I don't know that the PGA Tour is going to take their lead from Live Golf's productions. I don't see that happening because, I mean, you can make an argument across the board. The PGA Tour is just not going to do that. Now, what I think is a more realistic thing to do, and we see it certainly during the playoffs, during the NFL playoffs, where you're starting to get sound a little bit sooner after the fact, where you're starting to understand exactly what Patrick Mahomes was thinking when it seems like his leg seemed to break in half and somehow he was able to keep playing last week in that game.
You sound bitter. Did you have money on the Bengals?
Yes, I did. I'm going to be honest with you. And I can sit here and complain.
Somehow broke is like, nope. It was just a lower grade high ankle spread. But go
Here's
on.
the deal. And I don't pretend to know football, but the one time I saw Patrick Mahomes scramble to his left, he was clearly in pain when he had to plant and throw the ball. So he was scrambling to his right the whole time. I don't know anything about football, but I would have spent the whole game as a defensive end trying to get him to scramble to his left because that's where he was weak. Anyway, I digress. The point here is I would like to see more in-game stuff. Well, I want to hear sound, and the players are very protective of that because they don't want to say something that's going to be picked up on live air that's going to get them in trouble. Certainly that's happened an instance with JT just a couple of years ago. However, I think if you gave them the proper filters, if you gave them the proper assurances that there will be no airing of bad things, that we just want to catch sort of the raw, what was your response after this putt? What was your response after this drive? I think that would be cool, but I can't imagine anytime soon we're getting to a point where Max Homa is the norm, not the exception.
Yeah, it certainly sounded like afterward, Max Homa said that he's been having these conversations with Andy Pazder at the tour for the past couple of months and how to properly execute this. I'm sure that Andy Pazder has had other conversations with the game's top players in trying to make this sort of thing happen. Now, I think Max was a special circumstance, and I thought it was incredible that he was literally going back and forth with Trevor Immelman in the CBS booth. I could understand that most players would be apprehensive about that. And look, there's a lot of downtime. He's playing a par 5. You're waiting on the tee. You're walking up to go find your 325-yard drive. You're waiting for the green to clear. You're then walking to go get your second shot. Like, I get it. A par 5 is a perfect time to do that. Even if they didn't have the back and forth with the booth, just having the player mic'd for a hole, I think Saturday's the perfect time to do it. He was in the perfect situation at the time. He was like 9th, I think.
Well, Saturday, Sunday being the final round,
kind of on the fringes. Yeah, exactly. Sorry about the date. On the fringes of contention, it was the absolute perfect scenario. I don't want to see the 4th hole on Thursday because the players are just getting into their rounds. Like, I want to hear what it's like.
No, but it could be entertaining
for a guy trying
I disagree with
to
you. I think it could be entertaining if it's the right 4th hole. I mean, and if it's the right player. Like, that's what this is about, right? Like, if it's the right 4th hole, if it's the right player, if it's Rory talking his way through how he's going to play this par 5, I think that can be very, very entertaining. And I will give our colleagues at Sky Sports credit. They do it with a walking on-course reporter, and I think they have found a way to execute this very, very well and should be the standard that NBC, CBS, Golf Channel should take to the PGA Tour. I just think there is so much reluctance right now until it becomes the norm, which I don't see it happening anytime soon.
Just mic up the caddies. The easiest way to get around this is to mic up the caddies. That way the producer can pick and choose the audio. Everyone knows that they're being mic'd. Have you ever
spoken with some of these caddies? Do you really want some of that nonsense going on live TV? All right.
I do. And it's no different than CBS having a dozen or so boom mics on the sideline for a game. a couple of minutes after the fact, after commercial break, they cut to the audio and say, here's was some crucial decision making or what the guys were talking about on the sideline. That is not too much to ask to have PGA Tour caddies mic'd up with the understanding that the producers at the network would pick and choose the best and would not present them in a poor light. I don't think that's too much to ask, Chris. But if you also look at the leaderboard, what stood out here? Jon Rahm had a chance to get world number one, even if he didn't win. A solo second was going to be enough to get him to world number one for the first time in a
Ran
year.
Out of steam.
You had Colin Morikawa, tip of the cap, your boy, who you said was going to tumble outside the top 25 in the world rankings. First tournament since kicking away that 6-shot lead at Kapalua. Backs it up with a third place showing at Torrey Pines, even with his short game and putting stroke that is very much a work in progress. Keegan Bradley continuing potentially his march to the U.S. Ryder Cup team with a second place finish at Torrey Pines on the heels of his win last fall.
That's a weird shout to be making in January, but
the only player, Rex, the only player so far in this very young PGA Tour season who has both a win and a runner-up finish. Keegan Bradley going to be on the Ryder Cup team.
See, I'm not talking Ryder Cup in February. Like I don't start talking pennant races in June, so no, I'm not doing Ryder Cup talk in February. Not going to do that. No, not
Fair enough. This week, not a great field. We must say, not a great field at AT&T Pebble Beach, headlined by Jordan Spieth, Victor Hovland, Matt Fitzpatrick, and a couple other top 50 players. To me, the more intriguing event, Rex, is the Saudi International, which is now an Asian Tour event, as it was back in 2022. This is essentially, I said it in the open to this podcast, this is like a live preseason event. I mean, everyone's there. You got Phil, you got Brooks, you got Bryson, you have Cam Smith, and you also have, Rex, some PGA Tour players, some card-holding members of the PGA Tour, Cameron Young, Mito Pereira, Cameron Champ, and the like. What are you most looking forward to seeing or most interested in seeing this week at the Saudi International?
I don't think anyone who watched Dustin Johnson sort of plow his way through whatever that last season was for Live Golf was going to question the idea that, he's clearly one of the top 5 or 10 players still in the game. It doesn't matter what logo he wears on his uniform. It doesn't matter.
He's the litmus test. If Dustin Johnson isn't the top 50 player, the system's broken.
I would tend to agree. And look, this is only going to sort of make that even more complicated. There are world ranking points up for grabs this week, but I don't think it will be many given the size of the field. What is interesting, you pointed out the PGA Tour members who were giving conflicting event releases for this. The standard has been set. The Asian Tour is a tour that's recognized by the PGA Tour, so that was always going to happen. What I find fascinating, I was actually talking with 2 separate agents about this yesterday, that most, if not all, of the players who had some sort of agreement with Golf Saudi, they were 5-year agreements, which means most, if not all of them, come to an end this year. I think the more interesting litmus test going forward, like if a guy shows up, Cam Young being the primary example here, let's just use him. Let's just call it what it is. If Cam Young shows up there next year, then yes, I would keep a really, really close eye on Cam Young because I think he's interested in going to Live Golf. He's interested in the free money. He's interested in only playing 14 times a year. As it stands now, keep in mind where we were 5 years ago, or 4 years ago now. Keep in mind that golf was in a much different place, that Live Golf was still sort of this, even the people who knew about it just thought of it as something that was on the horizon and probably not to be taken too seriously. Now, it's a vastly different scenario. So if these guys re-up and do new deals, however the length of those deals are, next year will be the one you watch.
You and I are discussing this on Tuesday record for this podcast. We're also taping a Golf Today hit.
Give away the goods on that one?
Into this issue a little bit further. Phil Mickelson talked to the media on Tuesday in Saudi Arabia. Rex, I'm not sure if you've seen these images of Phil Mickelson, but he said that he's down to his college weight. Did not go into the numbers and the specifics, but if you look at his images, it is a little bit haunting. He looks absolutely gaunt. Not sure what is going on there, but he says he feels rejuvenated. He says he feels energized. He said he's ready and eager to put what was a quote embarrassing year behind him in 2022. He was referring to his golf, of course, and not any of the off-course extracurricular activities. Brooks Koepka also went along the usual party line, saying he feels great, he feels good, and he is excited to play. Didn't really have to say anything other than that. I want to see Cam Smith play golf. I still refer to him as one of the best players in golf. Is he going to get the requisite sharp play competitiveness under his belt before we get to the Masters and Augusta National. His course record there over the past couple of years is tremendous. And to me, even though he was not named that, he was the player of the year in 2022. Rex, what do you think? Pebble Beach has such a weak field this year. I think it's just 7 of the top 50 players in the world. Is this kind of an event you would circle for elevated status on the PGA Tour in 2024? The talk, at least right now, is that these elevated events are going to rotate and have kind of mix and match over the years. To me, the Pebble Beach event has long been one of the marquee events on the PGA Tour schedule. I understand why some players, even before this whole designation and $20 million purses became kind of the soup du jour, so to speak, why would they skip this event? They don't want to play with amateurs. They don't want the slow rounds. They don't want Poana greens. They don't want to play 3 different courses. I understand all of that, but AT&T is also sponsoring 2 different events on the PGA Tour schedule. This one seems ripe to elevate in 2024 and make it more prominent than it is, because this year it's unfortunately a little bit of an afterthought.
I think it has to be. As you pointed out, AT&T has been a dedicated tour sponsor for a long time. The former CEO used to be on the policy board, so he has been involved in these conversations. I will say, however, that it would have to be some sort of rotational thing, because they probably are going to add however many more, 1, 2, 3 more elevated events. But we're starting to reach diminishing returns. We're already having conversations about which one of the designated events are the top players going to miss. I think we had a conversation a couple of weeks ago about Quail Hollow. That seems to be the one that most guys are circling on the calendar, saying that, that one just doesn't fit into the schedule. Nothing against Quail Hollow.
It's shocking.
Nothing against. No, it's a schedule issue. This is nothing against Quail Hollow.
But it's just like, boy, that's a tough one to miss.
But look at it. I mean, let's look at it. I think Jordan Spieth is probably the best example here. That here's a Dallas guy. He's going to, and Scotty. These are Dallas guys. They want to play the Nelson. They want to play Colonial. And now you factor in Memorial and the PGA Championship on the back end of those. They're not going to play 5-6 weeks in a row. They're just not going to do it. And what you're talking about here, the penalty for not playing, by my understanding, is it's going to be some sort of fractional penalty about whatever your pit money was going to be. Most players are going to look at their schedule and probably make the trade-off of, this is going to cost me $200,000 or $300,000. Yeah, I want the week off. I need to be ready for the PGA. I want to be ready. I want to play Colonial, whatever the case may be. However, I think you can see some sort of rotation. Let's say, for example, that Phoenix and Pebble reach some sort of agreement. And I think probably AT&T and Waste Management, the 2 sponsors that we're talking about, would probably like that they're going to rotate it every other year. That way you don't have to pay this bill, and you still end up every other year getting a really, really good field. That seems to me a more likely scenario.
Yeah, that certainly makes sense. I'm very curious to see how it goes with 2 tournaments being designated elevated events, whatever you want to call it, $20 million purses the week after major championships, with both the RBC Heritage following the Masters and the Travelers Championship following the U.S. Open on the other coast. It's I'll be very interested to see how those go, what the player reaction is when they usually have the week after a major championship to debrief and decompress after what is a very fraught week being in contention. So that's certainly something that bears watching this week. Rex, there is no football to watch this week. This is exactly why I said that there should have the Waste Management Phoenix Open this week, have the tour's biggest party all to itself with all the attention on Saturday and Sunday. Alas, that is still under review per sources inside PGA Tour. Of course, no, it absolutely is not. My outdoor kitchen still under construction. I've been told it will be available for Super Bowl weekend. We have sent out invitations, about 15 to 20 of our friends to break in the new thing.
So mine's in the mail? No?
Yes. You're supposed to be coming up for some hashtag content sometime the next month that we will film in the backyard, details of which still need to be ironed out. Sponsors, please, the love of God, hit us up. What do you got cracking this weekend?
I want to go back to 2 days ago because I sent you a picture of my not Blackstone. I was making smash burgers and I just kind of had a griddle plate. And it works so fine, janky. but your response was so like that just makes me sad. Like here's the problem. It's so small I could only make 2. And here's the deal, like everyone in my house love smash burgers. Like, they love the way I do them. They love the way they taste. Like, it's like one of the things that everyone in my house looks forward to. And yet, again, I've pointed this out numerous times. The bunkmate doesn't listen to this. I wish he did. Apparently, the Blackstone's hanging on the wall outside and is actually called a TV.
because the 6 TVs you already have were not enough. You don't even watch TV in the bedroom, and yet you now have one specifically for the bunkmate. I mean, that was
I'd like to hang a Blackstone on the wall and see what she thinks about that.
It was sad. It was pathetic. It was embarrassing as a man that you were not the owner.
Wow.
of a Blackstone. It was actually funny. Last night I was thinking of you. Last night, wife and I were going over the menu that we want to have for the Super Bowl party. Everyone obviously brings something.
Over the menu.
It's a little bit of an interesting time, right? Like, you think the game's going to start at 6:20. People come over at 5, leave at 11. They're expecting some hot food. I've never, to be honest with you, ever cooked for like 20 people. So I'm a little bit nervous about how you'd present that much food, keep it hot, keep everyone satiated. But you know what we're going to make? Because something that's quick, something that's easy, something that everyone loves.
Pulled pork. No,
smash burgers.
Of course. Because you have a grill that you can make 50 smash burgers. Yeah.
Yes. Because we have a Blackstone. It's built into the outdoor kitchen. You can fire up a smash burger in 6 minutes, make it absolutely delicious. So, yes.
No FOMO there on my case at all. Yeah. It's cool. I'm happy for you. I really am.
I'm going to send you videos. I'm going to send you pictures.
Please
I'm
do.
going to live stream. Send it right to you. So that'll definitely be happening on Super Bowl
I
weekend.
will actually be in Phoenix during the Super Bowl partying myself, so you can save your snappies because I'll be firing right back at you.
Nope, you'll be pounding out 250-word blogs that no one's going to be reading on Super Bowl Sunday because the PGA Tour's biggest party, the Waste Management Phoenix Open, should not be up against the Super Bowl.
No one is going to read that.
You're wrong. No one is going to read that on Super Bowl Sunday.
No one is going to read it. No one is going to read it. However, I like the way they lean into the party. Like, I am looking forward to being there on Sunday because they get the golf out of the way. Not to sort of dismiss what we do and what we cover, but it's pregame. This is the tailgate. You go to TPC Scottsdale, you tailgate, you maybe watch a little bit of golf, you have a couple libations, and then you move on to the big game.
Yes, and that's a problem because you could just have the big game. You have an entire party.
But the Thunderbirds love it. I've talked with the executive director, Chance Cosby. He loves it. They love the way they're having 3 separate concerts next week. I mean, they have turned this into a very, very good party. Trust me when I tell you, they have sort of perfected this. They know exactly what they're getting. They look forward to this. They actually changed dates to make sure that they were in town for the Super Bowl the same week as the Super Bowl.
And I'm sure the players who are looking at Airbnbs costing like $50,000 are lamenting the decision by the Thunderbirds. Please, for the love of God, just have this opposite the tour.
No, they don't want to do it. Stop.
Yes. I'm
going to have Chance on the pod next week, and then you two can debate this because he will tell you exactly. He will give you actually the finances. He'll talk about how it's so much more successful to do it next week during the Super Bowl than it would be if they switch with Pebble or whoever else to avoid that limelight.
How would he know? It's never been opposite the tour's bye week, or the Super Bowl bye week. He's never had it opposite.
Yes, everyone else is wrong. You're right. Just stop. Why?
Yes,
just stop.
That should be our tagline for the pod.
Hashtag everyone else is wrong. Sign. Kisses laugh.
That's going to do it for this edition of the Golf Channel podcast with Rex and Lav. He'll be, as he mentioned, at Phoenix next week. I'll be on a covert mission. I'll have to blur my location because I'm not at liberty to say where I will be. The following week, however, I can say I'll be at Riviera. Well, Rex, funny story. Pro-Am. I got an email from a PR agency asking if I wanted to be a participant in a Pro-Am along with one of our other senior writers at Golf Pass. And I said, of course. Happy that you think of me. He said, perfect. I'll get back to you. A week later, email at about 6 o'clock yesterday, got an email saying, sorry, went in another direction with the media spot. I said, no problem. Do you mind sharing what the opportunity was going to be? He said, sure. It was going to be in the Genesis Invitational Pro-Am. I thought this was going to be like some Epson Tour event. I thought it was going to be in like Puerto Rico. I thought it could have been like something across the pond. No, it was one of my dream courses. Bucket list course is Riviera. I absolutely love covering the tournament.
What was the different direction they went? Just out of curiosity. Can you
clearly
say?
Another media member with hashtag more clout, or they just decided why would we
they
get
didn't
this
say
media
that.
member?
They didn't say that.
Someone famous.
Did they really? Is that the way it went? It's Bob Herrick, isn't it? Bob Herrick got the spot, didn't he?
He just got that Phil exclusive, which I believe was his 3rd or 4th since he went over to live. I don't know. I'm gonna be scouring the Pro-Am list on Wednesday of Genesis.
You had to
Invitational.
work anyway Wednesday. You couldn't have played in the Pro-Am.
I could have done one of those self-serving, like what it was like to tee it up with the pros type story that we see every
Tens
so
of people would have read that.
probably just as many as who will be reading your your Phoenix Open coverage on Super Bowl Sunday. Just had to slip that story in there. Shout out to the PR agency that crushed my dreams. That's going to do it for this edition. We'll talk to you guys next week.